welcome to Church Experience Online. We're so happy you joined us today. As you watch this teaching video, if you have any questions or need help getting connected, please don't hesitate to reach out by phone or email. Also, our website is the best place to go if you would like to access helpful Growth Steps resources, join a serving team, connect in a life group, get your questions answered, or support this movement financially by giving online. At the end of this teaching video, you'll hear one of our Church Experience original worship songs, and we hope that gives you an opportunity to worship and reflect on what you learned. Thanks again for joining us at Church Experience Online.
Happy Ladies' Day, and for all you mothers, we're so grateful for all that you do. I said Happy Mother's Day to a woman on the way into the first service today, and she looked back at me and said, Happy Mother's Day. Well, I'm not a mother, but I am so thankful for all you that are, and I'm so thankful for my wife, Jennifer, mother of our 4 children. You're an incredible mom, and I think you're amazing. All of you, we so appreciate you. Let's give it up one more time. Come on, guys. That's awesome. We're in this teaching series called Through It, and we've been talking about how God wants to help us get through whatever it is that we're going through. And I'm sure you're going through something. I'm sure you got something going on in your life, and if not now, just hold on, wait for it. It's going to come. And God is so good to guide us through it when we're in the middle of it. And as we begin this message today, I want to recap what we talked about last week. If you were gone, you missed it. We talked about the life of Jonah. Jonah was a man of God who had a message from God that he didn't want to deliver. God had called him to go to the city of Nineveh, and Jonah said, no thanks. As a place full of violence and wickedness and evil, and he ran from God. And we talked about how if you want to find God's purpose for your life, it's not always found by following the path of least resistance. In fact, if you just follow the path of least resistance in life, you'll probably miss God's purpose for you, because it's not always easy. And Jonah decided to take the easy path, and he ran from God, ended up being the hard path. We talked about how when you leave God's path, you can't expect to not experience pain. And so that's what he found himself in the middle of, a lot of pain. He was actually in a storm on a boat in the middle of the sea, a storm that God allowed and provided to change and turn Jonah's heart back to him. So that's where we pick up the story today in Jonah chapter 1, verse 7. Then the sailors said to each other, this is in the middle of a huge storm. They're worried about their lives. They said, come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity. You know, when we find ourselves in the middle of a storm in life, we're going through something, we want to know who's to blame, right? I mean, when you're in the middle of it, don't you think about, well, whose fault is this? This is somebody's fault. Whose problem is this? Who did this? We're looking for somebody to blame. And it says that they wanted to cast lots to find out who is responsible for making all this trouble. And it says they cast lots and the lot fell on Jonah. So they asked him, tell us, who is responsible for making this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? They ask him these questions trying to get the heart of what the problem is. What's the reason for this problem? And they're mentioning all different sorts of things that are not related to the actual problem. They're pointing the finger at all these other places. Well, maybe it's where he's from, the kind of people he is, where he's going. And it's not any of those things. It's that Jonah is running from God. He's being disobedient to God. He knows what he's supposed to do, but he's not doing it. That's the problem. That's why there's the storm. And I think the lesson in this, if you would like to pull out your weekly and write some notes down, think the lesson we learn is that we tend to point out many problems before we admit our own. How true is that, huh? I mean, it hurts to hear it, but man, isn't that true? We tend to point out the problems of other people before we admit our own. And that's a real problem. Because if our issue is the reason why we're going through it, why we can't seem to get through it, but we're pointing the finger at everybody else, our situation, maybe even at God, then that means that we're not pointing the finger where it actually needs to go, and we're not identifying what actually needs to change, which is oftentimes inside of us, which means it's going to be a long time before we actually get through it. And if we could just identify the problems that stem from us, if we could just own up to our issues, if we can own up to our failures, I think we'd see a lot of things in our life change much more quickly. But we'll blame others, we'll blame the past. A lot of people can use their past, maybe past hurts or pain, not to minimize those, but we can use those as excuses to say, well, because this happened over here at this time, then that's why this is happening. And it might even be, to some extent, true, but we use that as an excuse. We can blame our situation, some need that we have, some lack of whatever it might be in our life, lack of time, lack of ability, resources, and we make these assumptions that these are the things that are causing our problem, when the real reason we can't get traction is because of our own problems. That's exactly what was happening with Jonah. Jonah knew exactly what God wanted him to do. Go to Nineveh, tell them I'm not happy with their sin. And Jonah, for whatever reason, ran from it. Some would say maybe the reason he ran from it, he was a prophet from God. He knew about the prophecies that the Assyrians would come and that these other nations would come and bring God's judgment on God's people, Jonah's people, the Israelites, because of their sin. And so if he were to go and preach this message to the people of Nineveh, maybe they would turn from their sin and be used as an instrument of God to bring discipline to his own people, and he didn't want to see that happen. He didn't want to be a part of that. Maybe that's why he ran. Maybe it was just because it's such a wicked, violent city, could have been part of the reason. But he ran from what God wanted him to do. What is it that God is wanting to change in your life? What is it that God is calling you to step up into, that he's calling you out on? He's saying, hey, this has been a long-term pattern in your life. It needs to change. This is a situation in your life that I'm not happy with, I'm not pleased with. This is not pleasing to me, this situation, this character quality, this part of your life, and you need to give this over to Jesus. You need to let Jesus be the Lord of your life. You need to change. And what is it that you've been kind of pushing him away on? That secret area of your life, that hidden part that God can see, that part of your life that you haven't yet surrendered to him, those things that you don't yet trust him with, that area of your life that you're saying, God, I don't know, I trust you, I follow you, but not so much in this area. Where is it that you need to trust God more? Until we own up to our problems, our situation doesn't change. We all have problems, we all make mistakes, we all have failures. In fact, I love, and maybe this is wrong, but I love watching fail videos. I love seeing the fail videos. Maybe it makes me feel better about my own failures, but this never gets old for me.
This is either going to work or it's not. Oh.
Maybe it's wrong to laugh about that, but doesn't it make you feel better about your own failure? You know, I'm not the only one, right? I'm not the only one with the problem. See, listen, we all have problems. It's just about owning up to it. Marks a big step in your spiritual maturity when you can own up to your problems, when you can own up to your failures. They say that you can actually fail forward when you can acknowledge and learn from your mistakes. And Jonah, he was running from God, and the real problem rested inside of him. He had not yet allowed God to arrest all of his heart. There was still part of him that was holding out, and for whatever reason, he wanted to do what he wanted to do and what he thought was right, what he thought would turn out better for him or his people, and for whatever reason, he did not trust God enough to follow and honor and obey God in a difficult assignment. So because of that, he experienced pain, and those around him were experiencing pain, and they were in the middle of this huge storm that was self-inflicted. You know, God wants to change something inside of you to help you become more of who he wants you to be, and that's a part of the process. As long as we draw breath, God is changing and maturing and growing us. He's never finished with us. He doesn't just say, well, it's good enough. You know, I've come far enough. You know, they're not who they used to be anymore, and I'm glad they're at this stage. You know, they made it. You know, they're 7 out of 10, you know, in character and in their faith, and, you know, they love me mostly and most of the time. You know, I'm done with this. I'm going to move on to the next assignment. God never gets to that place. He always looks at you and he sees potential. He sees more in you. He believes in you more than you even believe in yourself. And when he looks at you, he knows that there's more that he has for you. And you need to know that too. You know, but it requires change, and change is not easy, and we don't like to change those difficult things inside of us. In fact, it was Mark Twain who said, the only person that likes change is a baby with a dirty diaper. And even the baby cries about it. You know, we don't like change. In fact, it's been said that there's only 3 reasons that cause us to change. When we hurt enough that we have to, that we learn enough that we want to, or that we're given enough that we're enabled to. And I hope that you don't have to hurt enough that that's what causes you to change, that you hit the bottom. But unfortunately, that's what happens in Jonah's life. Let's go on with the story in Jonah chapter 1, verse 9. Let's read a little bit of the story. So Jonah answers them. They're questioning, what's the problem? What's caused this? And he answers them. He says, I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. The very sea that was stirred up, that was being a huge problem in their life at that point. I serve that God. Verse 10, this terrified them, and they asked, what have you done? Jonah, what have you done? They knew he was running away from the Lord because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, and so they asked him, what should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us? Pick me up, throw me into the sea, he replied, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. Isn't that interesting how our problems can impact those we love and the people around us? So it should be motivation for you to change because of what God wants to do in your life. But another reason for change is because not only because you love God and want what he wants for you, but because you love those around you. And you might not see it now, but your sin will always impact those around you. It can hurt them, hold them back. If for no other thing, it keeps you from being your best so that you can give your best. And whatever sin is in your life, whatever it is that you're being disobedient to God from, that you're running from God in, whatever it is that you're being like Jonah, it's going to impact those around you. And those on the ship are feeling that. And it says in verse 13, instead, you know, these guys didn't want to throw Jonah over into the sea. It says, instead, the men did their best to row back to land. And people are going to do that. And sometimes people can almost enable you in your sin. People can almost enable us in our problems and our issues because it's awkward, it's difficult to kind of deal with the real problem. And so we'll kind of pat each other on the back and be like, well, maybe it was just a rough week. Maybe they're the problem. Maybe it's the situation. Let's just kind of, you know, let's not talk about what the real problem is, right? Have you been there? Have you been in that situation? And they say, you know, we don't want to throw you over, Jonah. Let's just try to work real hard. Let's try to get through it in our own power. Maybe you've done that. Maybe you're doing that right now. Maybe you know that God's stirring something in you and he's wanting to do something and you know you got to obey him, but you're like, you know, there's got to be another way. I'll just work harder. We'll just row harder. We'll get to, I got an idea. Let's paddle this ship through this huge storm to the shore. We can do this. I mean, God, he's created the storm. He's the one that's caused all this. I'm sure we can get out of this on our own. It sounds like a great idea, right? Terrible idea, and they're trying to fix the problem in their own power. That's what we often do, by the way. If you didn't realize that, we tend to try to fix our own problems. In fact, some people will even kind of push God away for a season and say, I'm going to go fix myself, and then I'm going to come back to God. If they come back to God, they usually come back broken, and God, I tried it my way, and it didn't work. I need your help. So the best response in our failure is to own up to it. The hardest thing in the world, but to come to God and say, God, I've sinned. I need Jesus. I need you more in my life. I tried it my way, and it didn't work. Well, they're trying to fix it, but they could not. It says they could not, for the seed grew even wilder than before, as the problems often do escalate when we try to fix it in our own power without God. Verse 14 says, then they cried out to the Lord, please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, Lord, have done as you pleased. Then they took Jonah. They threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. So they throw Jonah overboard. They'd had enough. And you know what? People will have enough at some point. You'll have enough of it at some point. You say, you know what? There's no other option. This is not working out. We're not getting through it. There's a problem. And you know what? God had a plan, and no matter how hard they tried to go around it, God's plan was too great. He wasn't going to let Jonah escape the potential that he saw in Jonah, what he wanted to do through Jonah. He knew that the people of Nineveh needed Jonah to go to them. And so God, in his kindness, allowed them to go through this storm. Kindness because he didn't give up on Jonah. He wasn't content to let Jonah run. Although Jonah was content to settle for less than God's best for him, God wasn't going to be content with that. Here's the lesson in your notes. God's plan is too big to successfully run around it. It's too big. God's got too many hopes for you. He believes in you too much to let you run around his plan. Now, he's not going to try to control you, but you're never going to get to it unless you go through it. And God knows that you need to go through it, and it's not going to be easy. There'll be times where it's difficult and painful and trying and all that, but he loves you enough, he believes in you enough that his plan is so big that he's not going to allow you to successfully go around it and get to it. And the only way to get to it is for you to go through it. But you need God's help to do that. And it comes down to, I think, a big part of it is trust. Trusting God enough with it. My youngest kid, Macy, who's 3 years old, came up to me this week one night after I'd brushed her teeth. She was ready for bed. And she brought a little bag of cookies to me. And she said, Dad, I didn't eat my cookies. And I was wondering if I could eat these before bed. And as much as I love her and as much as I sympathize with a fellow cookie lover, I said, Macy, it's bedtime and we've already brushed your teeth. Those are going to have to wait till tomorrow. I said, no. Well, she didn't like that, and the tears started pouring down her little 3-year-old cheeks. And, part of me felt bad, but I was like, I'm being a good parent here. Come on, give me a break. I was thinking, I'm like, this is going to be all right. And I said, no, Macy, they'll be here tomorrow. And then I realized the reason why these big tears are streaming down her little cheeks. It wasn't because she had to wait till tomorrow. It's because she had 2 bigger brothers and a bigger sister. And she said, what if somebody eats my cookies? See, she was worried about somebody eating her cookies while she was asleep. Now, what she really had to fear was Dad eating her cookies, to be honest about it. But I looked at her and I said, Macy, it's okay. I have more cookies. Even if somebody ate your cookies, I have more cookies. And so I thought this solved the problem. So, all right, took care of the problem with the 3-year-old, and I'm moving on with my thing, and she's getting ready for bed. And then she disappears. She walks away into the kitchen. She comes back a few moments later with this very box. It's a box of Oreos that's completely empty. And she said, Dad, all the cookies are gone. And her 3-year-old reasoning is, Dad said there's more cookies. I went to the pantry just to verify. I trust but verify. And there is no cookies. So, Dad, what's up? You said there's going to be more cookies. And so I'm looking at my little daughter. I'm like, I got you. Macy, come over to the pantry. So we walk over to the pantry. We set the box down. And I take over to the pantry, and I reach up into the top shelf of the pantry, Dad's secret stash. And I pull down a box of Oreos that is half full, and I said, Macy, I got you. Little girl, you don't need to worry about it. I got Oreos. I got plenty of cookies. you can sleep good tonight. You're not getting any tonight, but tomorrow you can have some cookies. I'll make sure you have cookies. That seemed to fix the problem. But what it really was is she needed to know that Dad was going to take care of her. And I think a lot of times for you and I, it's a trust issue with our Father. We need to trust that God's got us. Because when he asked you to put it all on the line, see, when he called Jonah to Nineveh, that was putting it all on the line. This was a hostile, angry, violent city where piles of dead bodies were laying around. We read about that last week. I mean, it was just a violent city. And God said, go and tell them I'm not pleased with the way they're living. Would you want that assignment? Jonah didn't want, that's not an easy assignment. God's not going to, he doesn't just deal easy assignments. He deals incredible and powerful and amazing assignments, but they're not always easy. And when he asks you to change something in your life, it's not always going to be easy. When he asks you to deal with a relationship that's crumbling, or you need to fix it and repair it, you need to own up to your issues, you need to pray in a different way and to a greater level, you need to start doing this or change that. I mean, these are not easy assignments, right? But they're going to get you where you need to go, and it's a trust issue. It's saying, Father, I trust that you have more for me. I trust that even though I'm holding these empty hands and I'm saying, God, I don't see how it's going to work out. If I give you everything, God, is there enough left over for me? God, if I surrender all of my life to you, then what do I get out of it, God? If I follow you in full abandon, if I trust you with everything, if you call me like Jonah to step into something, to step up to something, to change something in my life that's going to cost me, maybe my reputation, my career, some situation in my life that I love and value. I mean, God, if you're calling me to full surrender, can I trust you? That's really your question. You may have not identified it, but that's your question. Can I trust God? Do I believe in God enough? Do I trust him enough that I can surrender everything to him, that I can follow him fully? And you can. You can follow him fully. You can trust him fully. But it's going to take surrender to believe that he has your best, that he's got more for you. And all he's got to do is reach up in his pantry of kindness and open up for you what it is that you really need. And he can fulfill your life and your heart in ways you cannot imagine. And there's a certain way that you can take care of yourself or provide for yourself or, follow what you think is going to bring you joy. But I'm just telling you, God has more than what you imagine. And whatever you can do, no offense, God can do better. And so if you think, well, I know how to make myself happy, I'm telling you, if you surrender your life to God and you follow what he wants of you, you will find greater joy than you ever thought possible. He'll open new areas of your heart that you didn't even know beat it. You're like, okay, God, I'm feeling like something's coming alive in me. I'm feeling this heartbeat inside me I didn't even know I had. And God, the blood pumping through my veins, I just didn't even know that was possible. See, God can fill you as you are faithful and you trust him. God's plan is too big to successfully run around it. Let's go back to the story again. Jonah chapter 1, verse 17. It gets interesting. This is the part if you maybe grew up in a church, maybe you had a parent that read Bible stories to you on occasion. Even if you didn't grow up in church, you probably heard about this part of the story. Verse 17. Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, this is the crazy part of the story, right? A big fish comes and swallows people. I mean, this is a practical fear if your hobby is the same as mine is, which is surfing. I love to be out in the water, and you always have that in the back of your mind. You're looking around for, the fin of a shark or something to come and eat you, and it's in the back of your mind. I heard a story one time about 2 surfers that were out in the water surfing, and they saw what you fear, the fin coming at them. And the one surfer that was a little bit closer to the shore took off, and he's paddling with all he can towards the shore. The other guy's trying to keep up with him, but he's like, man, why you're not going to outrun the shark? He's like, you're not going to get, he's like, I don't have to. I just got to outrun you, man. He's going to get away from you. That's all I got. Jonah, he experienced like your worst nightmare, right? Drowning and being eaten by a large fish. And he's in the water. He's there because of his sin, because of his disobedience. God provided, it says, this big fish. The story I was told growing up, the classic Bible story, Jonah was swallowed by a whale. It doesn't actually say it was a whale. It just says it was a big fish. Could have been a whale. Could have been any other kind of fish. But it was some large fish that swallowed Jonah. It's a supernatural story. Let's be honest. I mean, it's a crazy story to imagine a guy being swallowed by a fish, and you're going to see he lives to tell about it. And just studying this, I thought was really interesting, just people's theories and reading on this. Some say that this great fish was a sperm whale, known to have swallowed unusually large objects, even a 15-foot long shark. Others have theorized that it's maybe it was a whale shark that has documented to swallow men and who have later been found alive in the shark's stomachs. Dog sharks existed in that area, and they could swallow a horse whole or a man whole. In fact, it was recorded that a man fell overboard in the Mediterranean, was swallowed by one of these huge sea monsters. The sea monster was killed, and the man rescued alive. A whole horse was taken out of the belly of another one of these dog sharks. Frank Bullion said when dying, sperm whales actually eject the contents of their stomach, like Jonah would later be ejected out of this fish. Either way you slice and dice it, though, it's a crazy supernatural story. And there's a God factor for sure. I mean, the gastric acids inside whatever fish it was would have been enough, you would think, to kill a man. And so, however you look at it, it's a miracle that Jonah was in this fish and he lived to tell about it. But isn't that our faith? Isn't our faith about that we believe that there is a creator God that's so powerful that he breathed this world into existence, that he spoke it into existence? He said, let there be light, and there was light. He created it. That's supernatural. That takes incredible faith. I think it takes less faith than believing that this world is just an accident and all the beauty that we see just happened. But either way, it still takes faith. It takes faith to believe that Jesus walked on the water, which he did, or that he put his hands on a blind man and healed his sight, or caused a lame man to walk, that Jesus rose from the dead, right? That God parted the sea. I mean, our faith is just that. It's faith. We trust, we believe. And we believe that God can do the supernatural, and that's exactly what happened here. But, there's a lot of theories in how this actually played out. In fact, some even think that when Jonah, as it says that he was in the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, it's compared to Jesus in the grave. It actually compares it in the Bible. Jonah's time in the whale or in the fish is compared to Jesus' time in the grave, how he died and then rose from the dead. And some think that Jonah didn't actually stay alive the whole time he was in the fish, that he actually died and God resurrected him. It would be another resurrection story in the Bible. In fact, there's kind of some hints at this in his prayer. Jonah chapter 2, verse 2, Jonah says this, he prays this, in my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead I called for help, and you listened to my cry. So he says, I cried to God from the realm of the dead. Now that could have been literally dead, he died in the fish, or it could have been figuratively in the sense that he was buried underwater in a fish and is pretty much gone. Either way, it was really bad for him, and God eventually, you're going to see, rescues him from this. But however you look at it, it was the result of his sin that led him to this situation. Verse 1 of chapter 2, it says, from inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He prayed. I hope you don't have to hit rock bottom to get to the point where you own up to your sin. You acknowledge the problem. You point out the real failure that was in you and not everybody else. I hope you identify that, because then there's hope for you to change. But some people have to hit rock bottom before they'll change. They have to run out of options. We have to get to a very dark place. I hope that doesn't happen. But oftentimes that happens, and it's even a kindness of God and how you look at it, that God would allow us to experience consequences. Because without the consequence of God, we'll destroy ourselves, and everybody around us will end in a very bad place. In fact, the Bible calls that ultimate end hell. It's a place without God. It's a place of pain, and it's forever, and you can't change it. It's eternal. It's the place of ultimate regret that you end up when you reject God. And God knew that Jonah was running from him, and so by him putting a roadblock of a storm in his way that he had to get through, that really he couldn't get through without God, that was God loving Jonah. When God provided the fish to swallow Jonah so he could hit rock bottom and have absolutely no hope, that was God's kindness to reach out to him and say, listen, I know you're running from me and rebelling against me, and you're doing what you want to do for whatever your reasons are, but that's not going to go well for you in the end. And so I'm going to provide a storm so that you'll know that I am God. And it worked. It got Jonah's attention, and Jonah's in the belly of this fish, and he says, God, I need you. And he cries out to him in desperation. Do you know that that's all you need to do? I mean, he's going to give you other steps, and you're going to have to maybe go change some things, fix some things. My dad, when God called him out of the lifestyle that he lived when he was a young man, he changed his life, and he had been in drugs and using drugs and all kinds of stuff. He was in a motorcycle gang, and God, he was on a high, and God got a hold of his life and said, if you don't change this, you don't change directions, then this will be your end. And he took that as God speaking to him. He grew up in a church home, and he kind of knew that was God's voice, and so he made an immediate change. went back and made a list of all the 50-something places that they had robbed or whatever that they needed to make right, and they went back and made restitution to all these places. I didn't know the story until I was a 19-year-old young man. My dad told me about his past. My entire life, he was this godly, incredible man, a pastor. I mean, all these things I just never knew about his past. So God called him to change, and do you know that that's what you have to do too? You have to say, all right, God, I was wrong, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to change direction. Now, he's going to give you more work to do to make the change, and you might have to go back and make it right. You might have to move ahead. You might have to fix some things and change some things. But that first step, that's the biggest step in the world. It can happen in a service. It can happen while you're alone in your dark room at night. It can happen when you're on a beach looking out at the water. But it's this moment where God gets a hold of you, and you know what you're doing is not right, and it needs to change. It could come through the counsel of a good friend. It could come through a message in a church service. But when God gets a hold of you, like maybe he's doing to some today, and he says, what you're doing is not right, and it's not going to lead to a good place, and you need to change. Once you know, then it's your responsibility to change. If you don't, you're eventually going to hit rock bottom. And that might be at the end of your life when you're lying on your deathbed and you look back and your heart's filled with regret because you realize you can't undo all the things that you did, right? And you're out of time. And certainly there will be regret at the end for those who reject Jesus and one day see God in all his majesty and power, the Creator, and they stand, in fact, kneel before him and realize they were wrong for their sin. And at that point, there's nothing left to do but to pay the ultimate consequence for our sin. But God is so loving, he doesn't want you to hit that place. And so what he does is he calls out in us and he says, listen, I believe in you and I want you to make the change. And so Jonah, he gets to that place, he cries out to God. And here's the final lesson in your notes today. You know, when I change, when I get to that place and I cry out to God and I make a change, God's freed up to change my situation. God's freed up to change my situation. He's freed up to change my life. But I have to say, God, you're right, and I wasn't. And God, I was going this way, and I know you want me to go this way, and so here it is. And you know, I don't think this change comes easy. I don't think it is. You know, we get caught up in our patterns, and we can be predictable, and to make that first step to make a change is hard. It's really difficult. You know, we get in these patterns. You know, my mom's thinking about Mother's Day. I love my mom, and she lives in Michigan, and when we grew up there, she would drop me and my brothers off to school, and we would get out of the car, and we'd walk to the front door of the school, and we'd get about 7-8 steps away, and we'd always hear Mom's voice over our shoulder. The window would roll down, and she'd say, hey, did you get that extra sandwich? You know, I put an extra sandwich in your lunch just so you know. Or we get 6-7 steps away, and she said, roll the window down. Hey, don't forget about that thing that we have tonight after school, okay? All right, Mom, thank you. And we're going to school. Or she'd roll the window down. Hey, just so you know, I'm going to be a little late because I have this thing at work today, and so I'll pick you up about 30 minutes late. Okay, Mom. There was always something. And even if she didn't have something, she would make up something. She would think about something, or we just like 6-7 steps away. Hey, just so you know, I love you. All right, thanks, Mom. It was kind of like this process of letting go for her, I think, and letting her young kids like get off and go. But it was predictable. I could almost walk 6 or 7 steps, just stop, turn around, and see the window rolling down. I knew she was going to say that just every time. It was going to happen. And you know, we get in our patterns, right? And we can even be predictable in that. We can kind of go through our process and our rhythms, and we get in. And you know what? Sometimes those things are really healthy and good for us, and then sometimes we can get stuck in the current of life. We began this year talking about the rhythms and currents of life, and sometimes we get sucked into the current, and it's pulling us in a bad direction, and you need help to get out of that. And so maybe that's where you're at today, and I want to give you, maybe you want to write these just 4 quick bullet points down. Here's how to get out of that. If you're stuck and you're like, you know, God's wanting to change something in you, you're at the Jonah's place, you realize you need to change. Maybe you're pre-Jonah stage and you're starting to run from God, and you're like, all right, I don't want to go there, but I'm ready to change, I need help. Here's what you do, 4 things. 1, talk to God about it. It's the first thing you do. You own up to it, you talk to God, you admit your sin, acknowledge the problem, but you get honest with God, you get real with God. We're not talking about playing church. We're not talking about, we're talking about getting real and getting raw with God. And we're saying, God, here's the issue. Here's the problem, and you can be honest with God. He already knows, right? He knows your heart. So you can say, God, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. All right, and here's my thinking, and it might be messed up, but God, here's where I'm at, and here's what I've been doing, and here's what I'm intending to do, and here's the situation, and God, just here it is. And you get honest with God. You get real with him, and you talk to God about it. Then you talk to somebody else. You talk to somebody else. You need a good, Christ-following, Jesus-following, wise person in your life. And I want to emphasize a godly person, a Christ-following person. This is one of the reasons why it's so important to get involved, not just attend, but to get involved in a Bible-teaching Christian church. Whether it's here or somewhere else, you need to get involved and get connected. Whether that's in a life group, a serving team, invite another family out to eat, invite a friend to hang out with you and get Starbucks or something. I mean, spend some time together, do something, invite them into your hobbies, you engage in their life. You need to have people around you so that when you get to those times, you can say, hey, I know this person in my life group leader, I trust them, or, whether it could be a pastor, it could be someone, but you need to find maybe a Christian counselor, but somebody who's a godly Christian person who can speak into your life, speak truth, can help you, hold you accountable, encourage you in your efforts, point you in a direction, see things that you don't see in yourself. Because we all have blind spots, and somebody needs to be able to point the finger at the blind spot that you can't see, and they need to tell you in love that you have a blind spot, and they need to be close enough to you that you don't push them away, get angry at them, yell at them because they're pointing out something that ain't right, but you know they have your best interests in mind. Strangers can't do that. Stranger walks into your life, and they point out some flaw in your life. You don't respond to that. You call them a critic. This is a hater. And maybe they are. But they don't have a relationship. You need to be in relationship with other believers. One of the reasons I love our life groups and teams and people get connected. I love that we set up Pipe and Drape and all the different things we do at the church, and we're hanging out and setting up this place, and it's amazing all the work that goes into that and the dozens of people. But I'll tell you the real value in that is the relationships that are being formed while we serve together. Breaking down after the service, we hang out 30, 60 minutes. The people that stick around for a while, they build relationships. It's a relationship thing. So talk to God, talk to somebody else. And the third step is you need to make a plan. You need to make a plan. If you fail to plan, as they say, you're planning to fail. And you need a plan. And it probably depends on what your issue is that you need to change, or what the thing is in your life that needs to be moved, and what it is that God's doing and stirring in you. But you need a plan. And it might be a very simple plan that you can write on a napkin, but you need a plan. Well, if God's calling me to go to the next level in my faith, and I know that I've been a casual follower of Jesus for a long time now, and I'm ready to take it up a notch. So you can talk to God about it and talk to somebody else about it, but until you have a plan, you're set up to fail. And it might be a simple plan. I tell people when it comes to growing closer to God, you pick a time, a place, and a plan. And so you say, all right, every day, the first thing when I wake up, I'm going to spend time talking with God. I'm going to read the Word. I'm going to read a chapter a day, or I'm going to read through this devotional book, or I'm going to listen to the Church Experience app. We have the Bible reading plan on there. I'm going to get on there. I'm going to follow the reading plan. I'm just going to listen along. I'm going to follow along, and I'm going to read the Bible. And I'm going to be in church. I'm going to shoot for every single Sunday. Unless I'm sick or out of town, I'm going to be in the service. I'm going to worship God. Whatever it is, you put a plan together to grow in your relationship with God, just like you would do in any other area of your life. And then you finally, fourth step, you take a step on that plan. You take the first step. You take the first step. Isaac Newton, in his first law of motion, he said, everything continues in a state of rest until it is compelled to change by forces impressed upon it. Everything continues in a state of rest. This is how God made the world. You won't tend to move and see movement in your life. You won't tend to see movement until there's forces impressed upon you. Don't wait until those forces on you are the result of your bad choices. Say, all right, I'm gonna start some forward movement with one step. I'm going to let that force upon my life be the Holy Spirit of God. I've opened up to him and I've said, God, I need your Holy Spirit to guide me, and I'm going to start moving in your direction. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm flawed, not perfect, not going to get it right, but I'm going to start moving. Talk to you about it. I've talked to others about it. Got advice. I've got a plan. I'm going to take a step tomorrow. Begins tonight. Begins this week, this month. This is my time. And if you delay it and procrastinate it, you're delaying the results that you want in your life. You say, I'm going to take a step. When I change, God's freed up to change my situation. That's the lesson. When I change, God's freed up to change my situation. And look at the life of Jonah one more time next week and see the incredible outcome of what happened. And there's just some really interesting and neat things with this story. But let me close today with one last verse from 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance, to experience transformation. See, God wants us to change. He wants more from us. He wants more for us. There's so much God wants to do, but he's patient and he's kind. And I say, God, you're so slow in getting me through it. And it's not slow as it says, as some understand slowness. It's patience with us, wanting us to change. And as we go through it, God's saying, listen, I have a plan for your life. There's more that I want to do in your future, but you need to be faithful now. You know, I think part of the problem is what we do is we get so worried about the future and what's next that we don't focus on being faithful now. You know, we almost use it as an excuse. Well, God, if I follow you, God, if I surrender to you, if I give this part of who I am to you, then what about the future? Jonah, God, if I go to Nineveh, then what could happen? What could Nineveh do? And what could, and God's saying, you trust me with the future. You just be faithful. See, you're worried about over there, and I want you to be worried about right here. You know, you're comparing your journey, your life to somebody else over there. You're worried about what's next, and God's saying, you worry about you now, at the here and now. You're using the future as an excuse. You focus on being faithful at what I put in front of you, and I have a plan. You can trust my plan more than anything. You can trust me if you put your life in my hands. Listen, just surrender. Just trust me. And when you step out and when you follow God, you will see that he is always faithful, that he will never leave you, that he will never let you down. And as you go through it, you will see the power of God. As you move through it, the power of God moving in your life, as you move from here to there, as you move from being faithful to seeing what God has in your future, and as you move from here to there, that whatever God has for you, as it unfolds, you will be blown away by the kindness and the goodness of our great God. So will you surrender? Will you trust him? Will you give your life to him? If you will see God do things that you would not believe, and you will see that he's an ever faithful God. Right on?
Thanks for joining us at Church Experience Online. Please don't forget to check out the website if you'd like to get more connected, learn more, get your questions answered, or support this movement financially. You're now going to hear a Church Experience Worship original song, and we hope this gives you an opportunity to worship and reflect on what you learned today.
Jesus, we trust in you.